Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of The Authentic Physician, a show about ambition, identity, and the health transitions that high achieving women are rarely prepared for. If you're juggling leadership, caregiving, and a body that suddenly has its own agenda, even though you've changed nothing, you are not alone. We talk here about honest conversations about medicine and midlife, meaning what it takes to lead without losing yourself. It's not about perfection. It's about alignment. And today I'm delighted to have with me one of our guests is Dr. Sookdeo. Did I say that right?
Yes, you did.
Excellent. One win for the day. And she is going to tell us a little bit about her story. And I'm excited to learn together with all of you what she's doing and why she's made some of the choices she has, how those choices came to be, and how she's found an ability to lead within her story. And I know we're going to all be encouraged. So welcome to the show. And Dr. Sookdeo, why don't you start by just telling us a little bit about your professional background, what you're doing, and then we'll go from there.
Oh, well, this is such a pleasure. Thank you so much, Dr. Loden.
Yes.
So I'm a primary care physician in Florida. I was actually born and raised in the island of Trinidad, and I always tell patients that my upbringing and my life actually decided my career. So I'm an only child. Came from a single parent upbringing. My dad was an alcoholic, but I also grew up with a lot of family and extended family back home. I remember just starting off with trying to decide what to do with my life, even when I was 9 and 10 and 11 years old, that would almost make my family proud, because when you grow up in an atmosphere of having substance abuse in a family member, it definitely does change things for you. So fast forward to medical school in Trinidad, met with my husband, and we came up to the United States, and I did my residency at Howard, board certified in primary care, and we moved to Florida about 10 years ago. Started working in employment at the time, and around 2018, we had our fourth child, and there was a lot of discussion around how are we going to balance 4 kids. My husband is in the medical field. My commute to work was 45 minutes. And so I said, all right, let's go. We're going to open up a part-time primary care practice. At the time, I wanted to just do bread and butter primary care. So it was really starting up in that fashion in my community in Winter Garden, which I absolutely love. COVID hit. I opened the clinic. And I was sitting down, and at that point, tried to figure out where to move next. And I decided to get my board certification in obesity medicine. That definitely was one of the best ideas that we had, and I learned so much. I also have a master's in public health, which really helps me to understand the needs of the community and tying in things with preventive care, social issues, the cultural pieces of health. And so here we are. So my clinic is 6 years old. I also started working with hormone therapy and hormone optimization. So I'm a member of the Menopause Society as well. And it's been fantastic. So the clinic has now gone from being part-time to full-time. We are a fully integrated primary care, medical weight loss, hormone optimization, and aesthetic clinic. The goal really is to serve women and men. I see all adults, but in the last 3 years, because of my personal experience now being a woman in midlife, having to deal with children who are 7 years old to 16, and seeing changes within myself, I started really looking at how I can just optimize my health and then, of course, transfer that to my patients.
I love it. Love it. Thank you. So then, as I think about you doing more and more women's care, like you said, it found you. And I think that's so true that as physicians, we tend to be drawn to the people who we have experienced in our lives or who we have become.
Definitely.
Without necessarily it being intentional. That seems to be people's story over and over. I'm curious, so take away the credentials. You've obviously done a ton within medicine and health and wellness. But when we strip away that, I heard you say you're a mom, you're a wife. Who else are you without the credentials?
Funny enough, and I chastise my patients for this because I usually ask them, I said, tell me about you. And I almost cringe when they don't talk about themselves first because as women, we tend to put ourselves at the very bottom of the list. So first and foremost, and so I will change my answer. Um, I'm a 44-year-old female. I am a mother. I'm a daughter. My mom lives with us. I'm a wife. I am a physician. I and I think that's who I am. I
Mhm.
definitely have started working on trying to develop me as a person so that when hopefully I'm 80 and 90 years old, I can look back and have no regrets in the way that I've lived my life and
Mhm.
the way that I've, shaped the lives of my children, the
Mhm.
people that have come into contact with me, the care I've given to my patients and even, the type of wife that I am to my husband and the friend that I am. So
Yes.
it it's always it's no longer for me about the destination, which is where I was 6 years ago when I wanted to start my own clinic. I said, I just need to get into a clinic and I just want to see patients and get home. Now it's more about the journey. And we've probably heard that from relatives and
Right.
elders, right? But
Mhm.
it's only when you start living it and realizing the importance of the daily things that you do and the impact that you make that you realize it's
Mhm.
about the journey. So I tell everybody now, I am a very proud 44-year-old female. I have a lot of other responsibilities, but I do try to encourage women as well to prioritize yourself
Yes.
alongside the others that are important to you.
Beautiful. What would you say? You talked about the commute. It was like 45 minutes, you said, in
Hmm.
each way, not total, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
And so when you look back 7 years ago and you think to all the things you were when you were what would that math be? 37-year-old female, right?
Yes.
So you have six kids. Obviously, one's little bitty. The other one's getting ready to start adolescence, it sounds like. And so there's a lot of transition there just in your children. You're working for some type of employed system. How many
Mhm.
patients did you have? What was a day like for you?
Oh,
What
girl.
made you leave?
So four kids,
Four
but six
kids,
sounds
yes.
good.
Yes.
um, so I'll give you a little backstory. When we moved here for residency, I was pregnant with my first. And my husband was starting residency. I hadn't gotten in yet, and I had a that gap 18 month, and that's when I did my master's in public health. And at some point, I wanted to just be a housewife. Within 3 months, I realized this is not me, right? I want to have a career in independence. And I was the resident who was either pregnant or breastfeeding during residency.
Mhm.
So the on calls, the late nights, as my husband's coming in to take over the shift at the house, I'm leaving.
Mhm.
And in my third year of residency, just a week after we had found out unexpectedly that I was pregnant with my third, my dad died. He passed. And I think that stopped my world.
Mhm.
So it did. I mean, I was probably angry for 5 years later, just couldn't get over all of that. But when we finished residency and my husband started fellowship, we had to decide were we going to go back to Trinidad and get all the help that we needed or really stick it out here in the land of opportunity for our
Yes.
three boys that we had.
Mhm.
And we made the decision to come to Florida. Figuring out a job also meant that we had to find good schools for the kids. And so the idea of the 45-minute commute was really to get them into better school systems and ensuring that they were fine. When I started off, that was one of the first times that I think I was very vocal about what I needed. And I said, I need a 4-day work week. I'm going to work 8 to 4.
Mhm.
And I was seeing close to about 25 to 30 patients a day in that 4-week work, but it was still something it felt okay because I had a Friday off. Right. So, there was a little bit of let me advocate for myself.
Mhm.
But by the time I had my daughter, because I was there for 6 years, I built a really
Mhm.
good relationship in the community. I had staff that was helping, things would run smoothly. I just realized that I was feeling a lot more tired at the end of the day. I noticed that, rather than wanting to spend time with the kids or just prioritize activities, it was more of catching up.
Hmm.
And we never want to get burnt out. I think that's just not the way because
Nobody does. Yeah.
you're not good for the patients in the rooms. You're rushing from one visit to the other. And that isn't what healthcare really is about. So yes, employed medicine, I think there's a role for it for a lot of men and women and physicians and, providers out there if you really want to, make your money and pay off your loans. But there will be a point, I think, for all of us where we realize that maybe I have changed, my circumstances have changed,
Right.
my needs as a human being has changed, and then you have to be brave enough to try to take that transition.
Absolutely. And so you were seeing 25 to 30 patients still 4 days a week.
Mhm.
And our audience is potentially not aware of this. You and I both know that that means you were seeing patients maybe, 32 hours in 4 days, right?
Of course.
But that doesn't mean you were doing 32 hours of work in a 4-day
No,
work week.
no.
How many hours of work were you putting in a week, do you think?
So, you generally get home after and you're spending about 2 to 3 hours with closing off notes, responding to patient cases, doing your lab reviews, probably prepping charts for the next day. But realistically, we can get into 12-hour work days. And it's after everyone else has gone to sleep that
Right.
you're burning the midnight oil.
So probably realistically a minimum of 50 hours a week, if not
Definitely.
60 or more some weeks.
Because we're not thinking about what happens on a Saturday afternoon or a Sunday
Correct.
night,
Or
right?
all the
It just
little in
never stops.
betweens. Exactly,
Exactly.
exactly. And that's not to say that so my husband's an attorney and I have several patients who are attorneys or they're accountants, engineers, right? Ambitious women of all across the board, also putting in a lot of hours.
Mhm.
But as a patient, it often feels like the physician runs in, they run out, and then you send them a portal message or you leave them a phone message and you don't hear back for 2, 3 days, maybe a week.
Mhm.
And you're like, how, right? And you
Yes,
made the comment, you're like, this isn't what healthcare is. That's not what physicians and nurse practitioners, not all of us see it as, but that is exactly what the patients see it as, right?
of course,
It's a
of
horrible
course.
experience when we ourselves wear the patient hat. And that's
Yeah.
partly why we choose to leave is to take care of our own health or our own, whatever our things are.
Mhm.
And so I wanted you to point that out because it doesn't matter what specialty it is, that's the reality. And this is, again, not medical school, not residency. This is
No.
just your real life doctor working in the clinic or hospital. They are not trying to intentionally ignore you. They're not out margaritas at 5 o'clock, right?
Oh, no. Definitely not. No.
That's not even on the radar. So it's survival. You were in survival.
Well, and even now, I mean, I can honestly say I wake up at 5 in the morning and I do some of my prep work and I contact patients sometimes at 5 in the morning. I have a lot more autonomy with my clinic. We've
You don't
set a
call them
lot.
at 5 in the morning.
No, it's on the
You
patient
send them a message.
portal.
Yes.
Yeah, right. And
I was
I've
like,
had
wow,
some
I don't know what my
patients.
patients would think if I called them at 5 in the morning. Good morning.
But it's so refreshing sometimes where they're like, "Hey doc, good morning. Why are you up at this hour on the
Right.
computer?" And
Yes.
and and there are a lot of patients out there now who understand. I
Hmm.
mean, it depends on how you set up your practice. It depends on the way that you are able to develop that relationship with your patients.
Right.
And a lot of them are aware because I'm now in a very smaller community and I see them in the groceries, they work out with me at the gym. They understand.
Yes.
Saturdays or Sundays, it's okay, Dr. Sookdeo. If we need to get in contact with you, we'll wait until Monday morning. So that's the piece of it that I feel you probably don't have if you're not your own
Right.
employer or you don't have
Correct.
a lot of autonomy.
Yes.
And and I frequently tell a lot of colleagues and even upcoming physicians, I say, you have to find what works for you.
Hmm.
And it does take time. It took me, this year's going to be my 20th year from medical school grad. So it's
Hmm.
taken a long time.
Yes.
But when you get there, you feel so much more fulfilled for yourself, your family, and for others that you're taking care of. And that's
Yes.
what life should be about. We shouldn't have these regrets all the time and trying to
Correct.
catch up all the time and feeling guilty.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. So many in our audience are aware of women's health from what they read in the news, but they may not
Mhm.
see it in perhaps the visceral way someone who works in healthcare might. And so share with all of us, and are you family medicine or internal medicine? Which
So
primary care
I'm
way did
primary care. Yeah,
Okay,
family medicine.
family medicine. So tell us a little bit. Family medicine does a
Mhm.
lot of a bunch of different specialties, right? Like you
We
you
do.
touch everything. I'm internal medicine because I felt like the cradle to the grave was too much, right? And
I
I just
got you.
wanted to focus one area. Like you, I also do obesity medicine and menopause
Mhm.
medicine. So it's interesting to hear that we have those two connectors.
Yeah.
Um, I really honed in on women's health early in my journey, partly because of watching what my grandmother, my mother, and myself, right? Those experiences
Yeah.
shaped me. So
Yeah.
I'm curious, as you think about women's health, I know you take care of men, but just focus on women for a
Mhm.
second. When you think about women's health, what do you think something is that we don't understand about our bodies during this time, especially midlife, right? Let's say 30 to 50, right? What
Yeah.
do women in this age range misunderstand about their bodies?
I think we're not realizing that we're undergoing transformation and transition. It's a hard start and stop. And I always go back to the amount of preparation and care and education that we have for luckily for our young girls. You're hitting puberty and every grandmother and aunt and neighbor, the pediatricians are talking to you about first cycles, the breast
Right,
tenderness. Do you have your little, packet with your sanitary napkins and everything ready to
right.
go? And just like you, I have started spending so much time thinking of my maternal grandmother because I grew up with her extended family. And I remember when she was going through bouts of depression, she would sit down on a Sunday and she would just start drinking a glass of wine or having something else. And then all of a sudden, you can just see how her body was changing. I mean, she was tired and she was just pushing through. In 100 million years, I wouldn't have thought of menopause at that time, right?
Right, right.
Um, but I think for a lot of women who are in their 35s to about 55s, because you are so consumed with taking care of children, moving up in your career path, probably having ailing parents as well.
Mhm.
And, for me, I have my boys are 12, 14, and 16. So I devote so much time into what's going on with them just from school and making sure that
Right,
they're taken care of that I don't pay attention to my tiredness. I
right.
feel like my fatigue at the end of the day is I've been up since 5 and then all the way down. And so when I started looking at hormone changes, it wasn't really necessary from the sense of I want to add this to the primary care clinic. I was like, why am I feeling this tired? I
Mhm.
um I was CrossFitting at the time. I did it for 7 years. I'm looking back at pictures from like 2019 after I had my daughter, and then 2022, and I was like, where's all of this like change coming from?
Right.
And with obesity medicine, as you do medical weight loss, the importance of that body composition analysis, right? So
Yes.
I actually had one when I was 35 and I had found it just cleaning through the office 7 years later. And I looked at it and I have a machine in my clinic. So I did it and I looked and I said, where is all this visceral fat coming from?
Right.
My BMI
Yes.
looks, yes. So again, to answer your question, it's really about we don't understand what the transition is. We don't realize it begins so much earlier than when symptoms start. And
Yes.
I think it's so important now that we are huge advocates for what women are going through and being able to sit with them and just bring it up in a consultation, even if they don't talk
Mhm.
about it, right? Just say,
Right.
hey, are you having any brain fog? Are you noticing
Right.
any tiredness? How's your libido? How's your mood?
Mhm.
And just leave it there. It
Yes.
starts turning around in their heads, and then all of a sudden there's another appointment with you, and they're like, I didn't realize this was going on for the last couple months.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
And just so everyone's aligned, visceral fat is different than
Mhm.
the pinchable fat. How do you
Yes, it
explain it?
is.
Right? Explain it to our audience. Why do you do it? Because I do it too in my clinic, and it's
Mhm.
good to hear other people have this offering to patients. So, what are you looking for with it? Why does it matter? Give us a
Mhm.
little biology lesson.
So of course, right? I tell everyone when I describe or I educate patients on fat. We talk about your subcutaneous, which is your pinchable, which in many cases is great. It's going to help protect you if you fall. It can give you a little bit, higher cheekbones and all of those. It's
Mhm.
good. Your visceral fat is the fat that is directly tied into what you cannot see, but is in and around the organs it does increase the inflammation, and this is at your microvascular level. And so your higher risk of your heart diseases, your strokes, your insulin resistance is coming from higher visceral fat. What is always interesting to a lot of my patients, and I use, an in-body to show them, is that you may have someone who falls in that normal range for body
Mm-hmm.
mass index, and their visceral fat level is at 10 or higher. And they may have a little bit of, midsection. Like you can see
Mm-hmm.
there's a little gut there,
Yep.
but you're not realizing internally how much of that is actually causing issues.
Correct.
So the focus when we even look at weight loss, or we're looking at optimizing your nutrition, optimizing movement, it is about the way we look. And that's why I do aesthetics at the clinic too. I mean, I definitely see the intersection between feeling healthy and what I say is feeling beautiful, especially for
Mm-hmm.
women, because it
Mm-hmm.
motivates you. But in the sense of the weight loss, it's really looking at really reducing visceral fat, optimizing those biomarkers for inflammation, cholesterol, insulin resistance, all of those.
Got it. And so when someone comes to you as a new patient, you're doing this, you get probably a baseline. How often do you recommend for your patients to check it, assuming they're taking, medications and they're doing the lifestyle? What kind of protocols do you do?
So I generally recommend anywhere between 6 to 8 weeks. I know
Mm-hmm.
that there are some clinics that will say come in every month, and there are some patients that I do have monthly with embodies or home scales. The piece of it that becomes very patient dependent is when you have a patient who may become overly anxious about,
Yes.
weighing all the time. They get either so zoned in that they start. I've noticed I tell patients it's a 80-20 sort of ratio, right? So you eat healthy 80%, enjoy 20. And so there are some patients I would say, okay, monthly, if this is working for you, it's keeping you motivated, fine. But if it is something that now you're not able to sleep, you don't want to eat anything, you're trying to get higher doses of a GLP-1, then let's just give your body time to settle. And so my
Yes.
preference is about 6 to 8 weeks on the in-bodies, to be
Okay.
honest. Um,
Just to set some expectations. That's why I asked. We don't want to
yeah,
have you do this every week.
no,
That's too
no,
much. But you probably don't want to go more than a year for sure, because that's not monitoring, especially if you're using a
exactly.
GLP. So,
Yeah.
and a lot of people get on the GLPs, and then the question is, how do you get off of them? What's the
Mm-hmm.
end goal? So you have to be doing those habits, mindset, lifestyle alongside to have those
100%. I
long-term
think sometimes
outcomes.
even, even before, because you
Agree.
can gauge the successful patient based on how much they are going to put in for your sleep, your hydration, your exercise, your
Right.
nutrition, and not use the medications as the first line,
Right.
so.
One of the things that drives me bonkers is when someone says, "Can I jumpstart my weight loss with this?" I'm like, "No, you can't.
I
You can't."
know, I know.
Um,
Well, there
but I
has to
get
be
why they
patience,
want to,
right?
right? Like they've done whatever they've done for years, and it's this is where they're at. So I get the want, but why can we not jumpstart it?
Yeah, and I think it's because we understand the physiology behind it too. The weight gain is not just that we haven't been eating well or sleeping. There's so much about weight gain that comes as we get older, and it's tougher for women. I
Yes.
mean, my husband and I, we kind of have this very friendly debate sometimes because, he loses and he's like, I don't know, 10% body fat. And he says, all you got to do is cut down carbs and that little belly you have is going to go. And I said, I promise you, that's not all I need to
Right.
do.
Right. I
So
did that. It didn't work.
it does, yeah. So
Yes.
very different from patient to patient.
Absolutely. What do you think about intermittent fasting? That's becoming increasingly popular in people's kind of daily media experience, and they're seeing different versions of it. How do
Hmm.
you fit that in here?
So I'm not a huge fan of full intermittent fasting. And I explain that to patients because in the sense that if I have someone who's intermittent fasting and it's working very well for them, I am not going to interfere with you.
Correct.
We
Leave it
keep
alone.
going, right?
Hmm.
But if we're looking at, and let's just look at I don't know, 48-year-old female who is starting to work on resistance training and she needs to hit her calories and her protein. And intermittent fasting is not going to allow her to do that because she wants this 6-hour window or 8-hour window, then sometimes I tell them, I say, well, maybe we need to stretch it out. For me, it's
Mm-hmm.
more about let's cut off your last meal at about 2 to 3 hours before bedtime. Let's make sure that your last meal is as high protein, low carb as it can be. Um, we may start with something that's intermittent fasting. And as we're looking at your progress, if we need to change it, it's okay.
Mm-hmm.
So, my approach for someone who's not been on any sort of nutrition plan or specific diets, I usually just work with them in terms of reducing your calorie intake by 350 to 500 per day. Or we just go into where are the macros. So let's get, body weight of protein, maybe a little bit more, divided up into 3 to 4 meals, drinks, or snacks. I don't like to use the word meal all the time because they think big portions. So I usually say it's an eating opportunity. And so, you might have 4 windows to eat. Let's see how you prioritize your protein.
Mm-hmm.
I really sit with them and I discuss the different types of carbs. So carbs, just dividing for them, I said there's sugars, there's starches and fibers, and they all
Mm-hmm.
intersect. But I want you to stay within a certain food group within the subset of carbs, and then use your hunger cues. So the other thing is, if I have someone who's probably intermittent fasting and they've taken up exercise and they start craving in the night, and
Mm-hmm.
then they want, everything that is going to be really processed foods because that's what your body's looking for. We have to talk about, do we add something in? What's happening? Because again, muscles get hungry. You can't be afraid of the hunger. You have to feed it, but feed it with the right foods.
Yeah. Yeah,
So,
there's a lot of wisdom in what you're saying. And what I also hear you saying, and I'll call out, is that it has to be personalized for each individual.
yeah, for
Um,
sustainability, I think if you
right.
pick up a I don't know, my friend is doing this diet and it's working.
Mm-hmm.
And I've actually deliberately stopped using the word diet with patients recently. Now I'm like, how is your nutrition? And I found that if I ask about nutrition, they focus more. There's something that clicks and they ask,
Yes.
oh, nutrition as in nutrients, as in healthy.
Right. Right.
Versus if I say your diet, a lot of them are, doc, I eat healthy. I have a good diet. It's a regular diet. So that little change in just that one word has given me more information just in the clinic from patients.
Absolutely. That's very helpful. And it's interesting too to me, as physicians and healers across all professions, I think we think of energy in terms of calories, right?
Uh-huh.
That's how we've been trained to measure it. I would venture to guess 95% or more. I'm pulling that number out of thin air, but that's what it feels like.
Yeah,
Of our patients, if we say, go count your calories, they're like, oh, sure, I'll do that. And then they won't do it. Because I know as
true.
a patient, for me, like if my doctor tells me to count calories, I'm like, when did you want me to do that? Yeah, no,
Uh-huh.
not happening. Right.
Exactly.
And so I tend to use a similar approach to what you're describing, of saying, this is how many protein grams I want you to hit per day,
Uh-huh.
right? Or this is your
Uh-huh.
target. Or look at your plate and I want it to
Uh-huh.
be, certain percent vegetables, certain percent of your
Yeah.
protein, whether it's animal product or not. And so I think a lot of people of healers within the space of obesity medicine have a similar approach. And so, if you're listening and you're wondering, should I start working with somebody who actually is trained in this, who has some
100%.
specialty here, this can be a really good resource. The Obesity Medicine Association keeps a curated list of everyone. I think they have not only physicians, but if there's nurse practitioners or
Uh-huh.
other non-physician providers out practicing, it's on there as well. The Menopause Society has a list that has people who are both interested in this subject as well as those who've gone and done additional training and been
Training.
certified in it. So both of those resources we'll want to make sure are in the show notes for our listeners, but I imagine you also tell people that. And so
I do.
letting them know where to find the help, because they may not be in our communities, right? You're in Florida, I'm in St. Louis. They may
Exactly.
need to find someone more local. I'm curious, I've kind of got us totally pigeoned in on this women's health thing. I didn't know that's where we were going today. So thanks for going here with me.
Isn't it fun?
It
It's so
is.
much fun.
It is. Well, and it's related to us, right? Like, who doesn't want to talk about something they're living with too, right? Like, That
No,
makes
it's true.
sense. I've noticed there are areas in women's health, partly because we don't do a great job historically in medicine of studying women specifically, but I've noticed that there's areas of women's health that just either are ignored or there's wrong information being given out. I think about, pregnancies and how many women don't realize if they have gestational diabetes or if they had
Mhm.
preeclampsia, they're at higher risk for heart
Yes.
disease at a much earlier age and diabetes. And they're not getting the screening because our system isn't set up yet. Even though we know from the medical research and literature we need to do this, it's not happening. And so I'm curious, does anything come up for you, areas of women's health that you refuse to compromise on? You're making sure all your female patients know about that one thing. What
Yes.
is it for you?
So, our kind of catchphrases and everything you see about our clinic is prevent, optimize, and transform. And we have guidelines. We all know about the USPSTF guidelines. I have started recently with approaching women from the standpoint of where are you now in terms of, your pap smears, your mammograms, your
Hmm.
colonoscopies, bone densities, body composition analysis. And I'll give you a good example. I order bone density scans at the age of 50. I
Yes.
know that's not the guideline, but have I had women in their 50s with osteopenia? Yes.
Hmm.
I've also found, and unfortunately, when you do medication, weight loss medications, and you're on obesity medicine, medical weight loss, if we have patients who end up with sarcopenia, the bone
What?
mineral density is going to go. So
Tell us
we
what sarcopenia is.
so, stop, yeah. So, of course, if you are losing weight and you are losing more muscle compared to fat or just muscle in general, yes, you are going to lose the weight. The scale is going to come down. The inches are going to come down, but your fat mass is actually not being lost. It's your muscle mass.
Mhm. Which
We
we call
lose,
sarcopenia in
which we call
medicine.
sarcopenia, right? So, I've had, unfortunately, about one or two women who have, over the last 2 years, they've lost weight. And actually, one gentleman that comes to my mind as well, significant weight loss, healthy
Hmm.
weight loss. Their cholesterol got better, their fasting insulins got better. And then there's a bone density scan that shows osteoporosis. Now,
Hmm.
is that a direct correlation from the weight? No, there may have been other factors. Were they smokers before? What's their level of activity? But, back to your question, prioritizing specific just screenings and biomarkers early on is important. And not all
Yes.
of that falls under what the insurance companies may pay for. It may
Right.
not fall under what guidelines will tell us is required based on evidence-based medicine. But I do I basically offer what I do for myself.
Yes.
So, bone scans, I've had a lot of, unfortunately as well, women who they've been, told that mammograms are going to cause breast cancer simply
Hmm.
because you're squeezing the breast. And so they're like, what can I do an ultrasound instead? And
Hmm.
I sit with a lot of these women and I say, I see more abnormal mammos for women than I see ones that are normal. That doesn't mean cancer, but
Right.
definitely you have to consider these things.
Hmm.
Um, so yes, there are different things. In terms of blood work, I always recommend, in addition to what your basic panels for cholesterol, blood sugars, a thyroid screen and stuff are, getting things like your CT calcium scores, looking at your lipoprotein A levels, your apolipoprotein B levels. Let's work out what your fasting insulins are. Not necessarily all the time, but sometimes just a baseline, because it also helps us to set an idea of where you are now. Um, you know, we have to focus more on what our health, I call it a health span
Hmm.
timeline, basically. But
Yes.
I look for myself, where am I going to be in my 50s and my 60s if I
Hmm.
continue where I am now? And if I like what
Right.
I see, we're okay. But if I have high cholesterol in my 40s and I happen to get a CT calcium score that looks, the score is 300, I'm in
Right.
trouble. I got to
Yep.
do something now.
Absolutely. So CT calcium score is a special type of test that you do in a CT or a CAT scan, as what our audience may know it as. The other things you're talking about are blood work. Insurance may or may not pay for all of those. They're not necessarily extraordinarily expensive tests either, though. And
No,
that's the side that people don't always get told, right?
correct.
Especially if you go to one of these national labs like a Quest, a LabCorp, a ClinLab, something like this.
Yeah.
So it might be more expensive at the hospital, but recognizing for our listeners, you may be in a community where this is not more than $100 to get a CT calcium score.
Mm-hmm.
And that is in our community, we have one hospital system that gives that cash price, and the other three hospital systems which charge $2,000 or $3,000 for it. It's
Oh my
absolutely
gosh.
bonkers. So,
That's just,
and a bone density, right? Like if your insurance doesn't pay for it, well, it might be only $120, $150 to go get, and you don't have to get that every year per se, right? But it's
exactly.
it's it's data that helps make informed decisions. And so, again,
And
going back, go ahead. Didn't mean
well,
to
and
cut
I
you
was gonna
off.
say, your health has to be seen as an investment and not as an
Absolutely.
expense.
Right.
And
An
it's
asset,
easy
not a
to
liability.
yeah. I mean, it's
Mhm.
easy to say when you have to think about mortgage payments and food on the table when you have a lot
Yes.
of expenses. But I usually tell patients, I say if you think about what the price of so like an apple lipoprotein B level, for example, I mean, I looked it up, it's $35.
Mhm.
So how does that equate to doing that maybe once or twice a year or just a
Right.
baseline test?
Right.
What can I move around in my budget to probably have
Mhm.
it done? And there
Absolutely.
are, like you said, there are places that will give you pretty good discounted prices. I mean, just yesterday, my staff was looking up a MRI of the lumbar spine, a
Mhm.
self-paced $250. So
Right.
there are ways to get around the system without using insurance, but to make sure that I feel like sometimes we go to the doctors, we have our insurance, we get a wellness visit, we want to get what's covered, and we leave feeling like we've actually gained something,
And we
except
haven't.
that you have missed so much that
Yes.
there's this false sense of security and
Correct.
you should have had more done to be
Mhm.
able to tell.
Or at least been offered the choice, right?
Right.
And
Yeah.
when I was working in the system and I had 3,000 patients, number one, I didn't have the time to offer all these
Mm-hmm.
things. But number two, it wasn't a conversation I could even have of, well, insurance pays this, insurance doesn't pay this, this is
Yeah.
the research, this is the why. And you need to be able to work with somebody who understands those because that's not taught in medical school. It's not taught in
No.
most residencies. At least when I went to residency, it wasn't taught. And
Same here.
so, right. So I'm assuming based on who I see coming out of residency today, it's still not being taught. And one of the harms of the world we live in professionally as medical doctors is this idea of evidence-based medicine. And that sounds
Mm-hmm.
great. Have proof for what we do.
Mm-hmm.
But there is a sense that lack of evidence equals harm in many of our minds as we've gone through the
Exactly.
system. And that's not true. Just because there's not a study doesn't mean that it's a harm.
Exactly.
And there's
Mhm.
misaligned incentives, which is a whole different conversation, right? That we
Yeah.
see as patients, we see when we wear our physician hats, our patients feel it, we feel it, it's real. And it's irritating that you pay so much money for health insurance and it gives you so little, right?
It does. It really
Um,
does. And the challenges always come back. So, I mean, I'm an insurance-based clinic. Our self-pay is really based on the aesthetics and, just patients who don't have insurance. But we've gotten to the point where sometimes I would order something and we try to get it through the insurance and it's not covered. And then unfortunately, some of the, general public, they come back to us and they're upset with us. And I'm like,
right,
this is your insurance paying for something or not. I can't do
right,
anything. Do
right,
I recommend this test? I do, but how it's paid for has to come between you and the insurance companies.
right.
So,
Interestingly, sometimes you can use an HSA or FSA to pay for
mhm,
some of those things
some
that
of
maybe
those.
insurance wouldn't cover as long as you do have a recommendation from your healthcare provider for it. The
Yeah,
other thing that I have found to be very helpful to people is to point out, listen, you're going to pay for healthcare one way or another. You're either going to pay for
for
it now
sure.
preventatively or later in terms of all the things, right?
Uh-huh.
And I don't think we like to hear that, but the truth is we do age. Our bodies do degrade even when you do it perfectly,
Of
right?
course. Of course.
So, how do you look at that? Discretionary income can be very different for different people, right? Sometimes they have zero and sometimes they have a lot.
It's
And
true.
I think of myself similar to a financial advisor. I tell you what all your options are and you choose, right? My
I
job's
like
to give
that.
you data. My job's to give you an education, and then you decide what's best. But not telling people, I think, is morally wrong. And that's
Yes.
the reason I left the healthcare system in part was because you can't give people just one picture and not the full story and
Especially
live in
when you know
integrity.
the full story, or
When
at
you
least,
know it, yes,
yeah, when we're
yes,
aware of it, you
absolutely.
have to. That's
Yes.
definitely informed consent. So I think it's
Mhm.
letting them know.
Absolutely. We are coming up on time. Tell me what we have not talked about that you wanna make sure that you get out there for the world to know for our listeners.
Ooh. Um, Now you've put me on the spot.
I know, I'm
So
sorry, I'm sorry.
I think overall, I feel like if I had to, and I know we focus on women, but for men and for women out there, I think we have to be aware that, like you said, we are an aging individual, and that doesn't mean that we have to get old with it. And so for me, when you focus on things like your health, and I always go back to my very first day in community health, and trained under the British system for medicine, but they kind of knocked into our heads that you know it was health is not merely the absence of disease and illness, right? But it's
Mhm.
also the presence of physical, mental, and social well-being.
Yes.
And if you find your provider, you find your physician, you find that one person that you can trust as your health
Mhm.
advisor,
Yes.
that person should be focusing on your physical, mental, social well-being, because that's what
Yes.
is going to optimize your health overall.
Mhm.
And I think,
Right.
a lot of times there's challenges with insurances, there's challenges with the time that a doctor can spend with you,
Mhm.
but you also can find someone that you trust. And I've always tell patients, I said, if you have a mechanic and something's wrong with your car and he's taking 30 minutes to find out what's wrong, you get really worried that you're not in the right place. Some doctors may take a very short time because they've known you for so long, and we understand your trends, and we know what's happening in the community. We know your family. We understand all of your health issues that give us time sometimes to maybe be rushed one day, but then take our time the other day. Find that person that you trust, and I think they're gonna actually guide you very well into your own health and longevity.
Love it.
So
Thank you.
that would
Thank you,
be
thank
my
you.
takeaway. I mean, I
Okay. I
definitely
like it.
think that, yeah.
Yes. So for those who are in your neck of the woods or who want to get in touch with you, what's the best way to do that?
So we have social media. It's Sookdeo Family Medicine, and then on Facebook, the website is sookdeofamilymedicine.com, and then
Mhm.
the clinic number is 407-395-2004. But those are kind of the best ways to get in touch with us. I think it's
Okay.
it's amazing that we have social media out there now in
Yes.
so much volume, so easy to
Yes.
find.
Love it.
Yeah.
Love it. Well, thank you for being here today. I've enjoyed learning more about you and what you're doing and changing the world. And it's been a blessing. So thank you.
Well, thank you so much. This was fun. I really
Good.
appreciate it. Thank you.
That's what I want is good. I want it to be fun. And for our listeners, if something in today's conversation resonated, it's because you're not crazy and you're not alone. The tension you're feeling between ambition, leadership, and your health is real, and it deserves thoughtful conversation, not dismissal. You'll find these deeper resources and next steps we talked about in the show notes. If this episode helped you feel seen, share it with another ambitious woman who's navigating her own journey. Because when we lead together, we lead better. Talk to you next time on The Authentic Physician. Bye.
Bye.